under the boom and bust cycles, workers suffered, communities suffered, and the county finances that were tied to that boom-bust cycle also suffered. Now that the Northwest Forest Plan has been in place, many of those problems have been addressed. The forest is growing and recovering, although it'll take over 100 years to really get to an adequate level of restoration and recovery that we need. Carbon emissions and water quality and habitat levels are already on the upswing and recovering from the prior devastation. BLM is selling significant amounts of timber. In the first 10 or 15 years of the Northwest Forest Plan, BLM sold 1.7 billion board feet of timber, which is equal to 340,000 log truck loads, which would stretch 3,500 miles if parked end to end. That would stretch from Seattle to Miami. This is a substantial amount of timber, and to say that the Northwest Forest Plan is not producing timber is not recognizing reality. Most mills have retooled to focus on a smaller diameter timber where there's a more sustainable supply. The economy is diversified, so we're riding through these recessions with a little bit less of a bumpy ride, and the counties have been wisely decoupled from the timber receipts, so they're stabilized, their funding is more stabilized. So with all these benefits, we still do have some challenges. We agree that there's a common sense vision out there that Jerry and Norm are getting a kernel of, which is protecting and restoring the best parts of our forest and then getting timber and jobs from a restoration effort, including thinning young stands. But there's also...
Doug, I gave an extra 30 seconds because of moving the thing around, but we're over now. We got to...
Okay.
Thank you. So now I am going to add in one. I do want to recognize the Ed Metcalf, the chair of the Coquille Indian Tribe, and if you can be succinct, Ed. I know the tradition is to take us back to the beginning of time and bring us up to the present. But if you can just sort of deal with the present for us, that would be great. I'll give you a couple of minutes, okay?
In this setting, I've never been known for being long-winded.
Yeah.
But I want to thank you also for being here and looking into this for us and inviting us here. The Coquille Tribe, the economy and jobs are extremely important to us, as well as our culture, our healthcare, our education, and our elders. And we've always felt that the Gang of Four, Dr. John Gordon, Norm Johnson, Jerry Franklin, Jack Ward Thomas, and all those folks have done a great job in working on the Northwest Forest Plan, and we have to follow that. We're the only tribe in the United States that has to go under the Northwest Forest Plan, which is way out there, and we would like to get out from under it and get under the National Indian Reforestation Plan, like all the other tribes in the United States. But one thing we've always done is we've always relied on experts in our timberlands. Dr. Norm Johnson and Jerry Franklin and Dr. John Gordon have all helped us immensely. And right now we have Dr. Gordon under contract, and he advises us and helps us. And we felt that the Whopper would have been a good example of what could have been done for the Northwest. It needed a lot of tweaking. It had a lot of science in it, and it would have probably worked for us. And I also would just like to add a couple comments here from my Land Resource and Environmental Service Director, Tim Friedenberg. I'd just like him to say something.
You have to be very brief.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Secretary, you are the trustee for the tribe, as you know, and you have a very unique relationship with the Coquille because they are the only tribe that manages under the federal standards and guides. So we want to, every chance we get, to remind folks in your department and your agencies of that special relationship. And when you choose federal new management direction for the federal lands, you're also choosing that management direction for the Coquille people. So want to mention that, and there's more we'd like to share
another time. Thank you. Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now we're going to turn to the commissioners. And remember, we all understand the extraordinary importance, and the Secretary understands the extraordinary importance of county payments, and you know, we've had that discussion elsewhere. So I prefer for you to use your time to focus on your vision for land management and forest recovery.
Thank you. Secretary Salazar, thank you for coming to Douglas County. We're delighted you're here. And Congressman DeFazio and Senator Berkeley, thank you for taking time out of what we know busy schedules. Mr. Secretary, your agency is in charge of a very unique category of federal forest land, maybe the most unique in the country. These lands are very unlike national forests. They are unique historically, they're unique legally, and they're unique physically. As you know, they form a checkerboard from Portland down to Ashland in the Interior Valley and west side of Oregon. Even though they're called the Oregon and California Revested Grant Lands, there aren't any in California. There aren't any in any other state, only Oregon, which makes them even more unique in that regard. About a year ago, the Association of O&C Counties recognized that we were headed for a perfect storm. We had lost the Western Oregon Plan revision. Unemployment is rampant and still is in our communities. And it appears as though we are continuing to struggle, as Congressman DeFazio and incidentally Congressman Salazar in Colorado, who is also very helpful with secure rural schools reauthorization, is headed for conclusion in 2012, leaving counties and resource-dependent communities in a very, very difficult situation. We came together with the realization that what is needed now is a plan that addresses all of the issues that stakeholders have in dealing with this situation. If you view this issue as a piece of fabric, this federal forest issue is a piece of fabric, and you've heard people around the table, everybody is tugging a little different way on this fabric, and it's very difficult in that context to establish a plan. We recognized that a plan was going to have to offer something substantial to all stakeholders if it was going to have any chance of moving forward. We developed a plan that we think does that. A plan that creates conservatively in the first 3 to 5 years 20,000 new jobs. A plan that provides raw materials for the forest products industry on a sustainable and predictable level. A plan that sets aside 1,170,000 acres for the conservation community, targeting old growth forest and the most environmentally sensitive areas on this landscape. The plan then provides for the sale of 1,200,000 acres of the younger stands of timber on lands that are already heavily eroded, have already been logged, and are interspersed already with primarily industrial forest owners. Those lands would be targeted for sale over a period of 10 years, generating enough money for an endowment fund from which the counties could exist relative to the interest earned on that fund, and also money that would be used to offset the cost of the reauthorization of the federal government, which is going to be substantial. We recognize that this plan is not a do-all, end-all, but it's a place to start. It puts something substantive on the table for everyone's consideration and input. The legal history of these, as Peter pointed out, we don't have time to go into the history of these lands. We won't, although it's fascinating history. Are very direct.
Doug, I don't know how you're dividing up the time, but you're at 4, you got 10 for the 3, so whatever arrangements you guys have.
Good. Well, I'm going to stop very, very shortly and go to Faye and to Dave. Today, your land managers can't manage the land base. The rules, restrictions, regulations, and requirements simply don't allow them to manage them for their stated purposes. What they do instead is they manage paper and process and litigation. And that's not good for the land base, it's not good for the stakeholders, and it's not good for the federal government, and we can do better than that. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Commissioner Faye Stewart from Blaine County.
Thank you, Mr. Salazar, for this opportunity today. I would like to start with, I believe we're at a very critical time in county government and also in our rural communities. I happen to represent nearly 2/3 of Lane County, and it's virtually all rural communities, and we're hanging on by a thread right now. And it's absolutely critical that we find a way to start restoring jobs and bring our communities back to health. I have been and came from a timber family, and before I became a commissioner, I operated in the woods industry for nearly 20 years. A small business that was able to manage on a sustainable harvest, and it is possible to do it and create jobs. It isn't about clear cutting or that, but I will urge you to spend the time to determine what values that we want to determine are important with our forest, and we need to have an active management role in stewardship. Critical. Our forests will not survive by themselves. They do. We need to determine what the values are that we want to receive from those, and we need to manage. That will produce active management, which will create jobs, which will produce a product. It will start restoring the health of our communities and our forests. They're deteriorating. And I don't know what it's going to take to bring these people around the table, but I've been a part of this conversation for 25 years, and it's been a fight. We need to stop the fight, because I guarantee you our communities that used to be healthy, vibrant communities are on the verge of poverty and failure. They are barely hanging on, and they need to find a way, we need to find a way to bring them back. And Lord knows in Lane County we've tried with different industries, we've tried with everything, and it has not worked. We need to get back and recognize that we do have a role as stewards. And we need to find out what that role is, determine the values, and start managing for them.
Commissioner Dave Toller, Josephine County.
I'd like to welcome Secretary Salazar. I really appreciate your commitment. I know you've been in Oregon a couple times in the last several weeks, and we really appreciate your commitment to helping us resolve what has been a problem for far too long for Southern Oregon. I think we just really urge our agencies to stop focusing on what we don't agree with and begin to really focus on where we do have common ground. Restoration is clearly what the scientists are calling for. Restoration can clearly include commercial product, but it also can include restoration of our forests. It can also make our rural communities safer. We're doing that in Josephine County, particularly with the Forest Service. We have some great projects that are collaborative, that have everybody around the table. That forest is meeting their timber projections, and I think we can move the BLM to get there as well. I think it's a place to start. I think we've got the paralysis of what we don't agree on has been tremendously difficult for our economy in Josephine County and Southern Oregon, and also very difficult for the health of our forests and the safety of our rural communities. So there are solutions there. They're being practiced on the ground today in Josephine County. We just need to do a lot more of it. But we know the solutions are there. And secondly, I just want to point out that for this restoration to continue, it has to be economically sustainable. We're not going to be able to use federal funds to continue these projects. They have to pay for themselves. Therefore, they're going to have a level of commercial product. There's no doubt about that. But again, I've been in the forest with the environmental groups and with timber folks, and we've agreed on some of that commercial product as we're looking at those trees. So I know the solution is out there on the ground. It's being practiced. Finally, I think the key is we also need to diversify our timber industry. We all know that demand has been a big problem. We run the third largest county forestry program in the state of Oregon. We haven't been able to sell much timber in the last 2 to 3 years. If we can diversify the forest product to include energy product, we know that we will have a stronger forest industry in Southern Oregon. And we've got to make moves in the Senate, as well as the House, as well as our agencies to help make that happen. We're sitting on a lot of potential resource for energy product in Southern Oregon. We need energy independence in this nation, and we have part of that solution right here in Southern Oregon. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you. With that, we're going to turn in a second to the Secretary. I'd just kind of like to just put a little context for the Secretary's remarks. You know, I think when we first had discussions when the administration withdrew the Whopper, we had 2 major things in mind. One was interim supply of timber that was provided in an appropriate and sustainable way. And secondly, moving toward a longer-term plan that hopefully we can find some consensus or agreement about. So I'd suggest three things. One would be if and the Secretary might respond to this or respond to other remarks, but since I've been involved in these pitch battles for so long, I'd just like to have my 2 cents worth here. I think we need the agency, the BLM itself, and again, this is unique to the BLM in Oregon. We need to bring in a panel of experts who can look at what, in particular, they've been doing on the failed projects in Southwest Oregon. We've heard one side that they've offered, and a lot of timber's been out there, but it's not being sold, and it's not available in certain areas. It's geographically limited. So looking at the things that were challenged, that were no bid, where consultation failed, where we ended up with small, uneconomical projects, and look at, in terms of instructing the short term, how we might work within the context of current administrative rules and the law to offer some more projects, particularly in the southern part of the district in the short term. Secondly, look at some pilot projects, and the scientists might have a comment on that. But I think it's critical that we look at a couple of pilot projects. And third, we need to move along with the long-term plan, not a plan to plan, but actually a plan. The scientists have provided a vision which they believe, and being 2 of the 4 authors of the Clinton Forest Plan, could be done administratively, or whether we need to be looking at legislation, I'm not certain, but to have sort of a timeline to move forward with the plan. So with that, Mr. Secretary, thank you for your time. We are running a little late, so I want to recognize you and hope we have a few minutes for general discussion after that. So.
Thank you very much, Congressman DeFazio. I'm gonna stand up so I can see everybody in the room, if that's okay with you. Let me just say, first of all, to you, Congressman, thank you for inviting me here to Oregon to see the ground and to see the people who are affected by decisions that are made by the Secretary of Interior. You, from day one, essentially cornered me in Washington, D.C. and said, you can't forget about Southern Oregon and the issues that we're working on there. I've appreciated the correspondence that I've gotten from you over the last year. And Senator Berkeley, thank you for you bringing me here as well, and for your work with us on the Klamath River and the rest of the issues that are so important for Oregon. Let me just say that I'm here today because about 2 months or so ago, I was summoned to the United States Capitol. And so in the Oregon delegation, and you have Peter DeFazio on the line, and they say, we want you and need you to come here to the Capitol because we have some problems with you. You say, as Secretary of Interior, when do you want me to show up? And so I went to the Capitol, and they said, we have a problem. We have a problem in terms of the conflicts and the economics and the environmental issues that we're facing on these ONC lands in Southern Oregon, so we need you to address them, and we're not happy. So we have engaged in conversation with the Oregon delegation. Congressman DeFazio had asked me to come here a long time ago, and so here is why I am here today, is to learn from all of you, and I appreciate the conversation that he has so ably structured as we've gone around and listened to the different interests today. So let me just pledge to all of you, this is not at all the end of work that we have to do. This is, if you will, the beginning, hopefully, of what will be a new chapter. And to you, the county commissioners who live with these issues every day, I appreciate the kind of creativity and thinking that you put into these issues, because you know where the rubber hits the road in terms of your county budgets, but also in terms of the people which you represent. And to the timber industry who is here today, I thank you, because I know that as I have heard from you over the last year, you are representing companies that have been in existence for decades, for nearly a century in some cases, and the people who work in your companies, frankly, rely on having jobs in order to be able to make a living. I recognize that very much. To the conservation community, we have one planet, and it's a planet which we are blessed to inhabit, and how we take care of it is a very important obligation which I have as Secretary of Interior, which we share as fellow human beings. And yes, we can look back at our history and And sometimes we have not treated, in fact, many times we have not treated our planet in the way that we should have, and so we've learned a lot as we have moved forward. And I often talk about our own conservation agenda in the context of Teddy Roosevelt as a wilderness warrior, a Republican president who stood up for conservation when no one else would. Now having the first White House conference on conservation 102 years ago. And so how we move forward in the new realities, with the new information and the new science that we have today is very much a part of our responsibility. And the tribes, the Gulf Coast tribe, I recognize the huge important role that I have as Secretary of Interior in terms of my trust relationship with the 564 tribes of the United States. Let me make just a comment about my job, a comment about this issue and the kind of values that I see, and maybe suggest a couple of ways forward, Congressman DeFazio. First, you know, I do have the most wonderful job of any member of the cabinet in the United States of America, because my job takes me from sea to shining sea out into the 1.75 billion acres of the Outer Continental Shelf. I deal with energy, from conventional energy on oil and gas, as we've seen in the Gulf Coast over the last 6 months, to onshore oil and gas, working on renewable energy projects like solar, wind, and geothermal. It takes me from the great places like Crater National Park, Acadia, Maine, the Glacier National Park, the Grand Canyon, and way out into many of our 554 national wildlife refuges all over the country. And so it is indeed a wonderful blessing that I have to be the Secretary of Interior for this wonderful country. Secondly, I want to just make a comment about how I look at this issue, because I see the pain and I see the emotion, and I see how much all of you have invested of your personal energy into this issue. It's not just been for a week or a month or a year, but it's been for decades. It's been for many decades. The gang before and the gang now too, you know, have talked about the whole history of involvement in this issue. You know, I would hope that through these conversations that we have initiated, that maybe we can find a new way forward, that we can figure out a way of dealing with this conflict and address the important economic issues which are so important to workers, to the companies, and to the counties. At the same time, figure out a way of addressing the ecosystem protection and restoration efforts, which are so important to the conservation community. And I want to share a story with you that I think will maybe exemplify how I will approach and want to make sure we get to effective solutions here. And when I was back in my day as a farmer and rancher in the southern part of Colorado, I come from a place which is one of the poorest areas in the entire nation. In fact, the county that I live in, my brother lives in, where I grew up, is the fourth poorest county in the United States of America. So if you talk about unemployment rates of 20 to 25%, that's kind of the unemployment rate that we have down where I come from. So I grew up in a place that didn't have electricity and didn't have telephone. And I know what it's like in that little county of Conejos County, in the entire valley. It's a 5-county area, 140 miles south to north, 70 miles east to west. Very rural, very agricultural in its nature. But I recognize very much from that point of view how important one job is. Okay, it's not like when you are living in Denver, Colorado, or Colorado Springs, Colorado, where companies come and sometimes they'll bring 10 jobs, and 100 jobs, and even 1,000 jobs. You know, for us in my native valley, if you get one job, it's kind of a big deal. If you get 5, it's really, really a big deal. It's a front page kind of celebration. So you understand the economic issues which many of you have pointed out. I also recognize the importance of conservation, because it is in that valley that we have Great Sand Dunes National Park. We have several major rivers which we use both for irrigation and for recreation. And hunting and fishing and tourism are probably second only to agriculture in terms of the economic infusion that we have into that area. So a long time ago, this valley was very much fighting with each other. The north hated the south for historic reasons and because of fights that have taken us to the Colorado Supreme Court on many different times over the issue of how we allocated water in this very dry area. The ranchers and farmers who I hung around with and worked with all my life, hated the environmentalists. If you were an environmentalist in my valley, and you dared say that you were an environmentalist, chances are that they'd want to hang you, okay? You were not a welcome group in my valley, okay? Conservationists were not, okay? Now, the agricultural and economic interests essentially ran that valley for a long time. Well, there came a period of time where they had to come together because of the fact that they were threatened from the outside for their water supply.